Hi, Michelle.
Hey,
And
good morning, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm well. I debated the camera. I'm in the early stages of an ugly COVID beard right now.
Well, it's good to see your face. I know the students will like having a face to the name.
That's why I did it.
Yeah, good
Glamour
deal.
has never really been part of my job anyway.
Well, I think we'll have a good crew. About 8 or 9 folks have registered, so.
Excellent. And you sent me the question, the pre-question, so I
Yeah.
can cover that. Good deal. Good times. So many emails. Let's make sure I have that email open so I can look at that question again. Got it. Oh no, it didn't come. It came through Teams. There it is. My dog is giving me real side eye right now. Hi, Rachel. I remember you from the last time I did this. You doing
Hello.
all right today?
Yeah, how about you?
Not bad. Not bad. I wish it would decide if it was going to rain or not.
Me too.
And I was just saying my dog is giving me the strangest side eye right now because he doesn't understand why I'm in the living room, like talking to my computer. He's all right though.
What kind of dog?
He is a pit lab mix,
Mhm.
so he's just cute. He's about 20 weeks old, so
Oh,
still a baby.
is he gonna get big?
I think so. He's about 30 pounds now. I think he's probably going to end up between 45 and 50.
Mm,
It's a good medium size.
yeah.
I think we'll go ahead and get started. Just after 11 o'clock this morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Lockhart, and I'm with the Office of Graduate Education. And I welcome you this morning to our presenter, Chris Edwards. He's the Assistant Head of Information Literacy and Instruction at the University Library, and he's presenting today on what is a DOI anyway. And we're looking forward to the presentation. Just a couple of things here before we get started. We have the chat option here in Zoom, and I'll be monitoring that and letting Chris know of any questions that have come up. And I'll go ahead and read them aloud. I'll do that because some folks don't have the capability to read. They may be viewing this on their phone or other circumstances. So I'll go ahead and read that so that everybody is able to hear the question and the answer. And then if you don't mind, if you would please mute your audio just to help with the background noise and dogs barking, gardeners out, all sorts of things here in the background. So thanks a lot. And I'll go ahead and mute and turn it over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy you guys were interested. We kind of came up with a list of topics when we were planning these sessions with OGS and tried to think of things we get asked questions a lot about. And DOI is one of those that we get a lot, and we get it from all quarters. We get it from undergraduates who are having to write bibliographies for the first time, or graduate students, all the way up to faculty. In fact, the first DOI question I ever had was actually from a faculty member. So they confuse everybody. And because they are relatively new. And it's interesting how even in our fast-paced internet world, things like a DOI system, which you think everything is just turns on and becomes instantly universal, it takes a while for things to percolate. So let me share my screen. I have a little PowerPoint, and I'm also going to show you some screens live from the library as well. All right. I'm trying to get to the slideshow option. From the beginning. All right. A very good place to start. So I think someone confirm for me that you are seeing something.
You can see it?
Yeah, can you see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. All right, so what is a DOI anyway? This is one of those things I could give you a really short answer, but I'm always tend to give long answers. A DOI is short for Digital Object Identifier, and in simplest terms, it's a unique registered code that is specific to a single article or publication in a digital format. And most of the time we're talking about articles, but DOIs it's a very flexible system, so they can be applied to books, book chapters, individual book chapters. We have some great video resources that have DOI, so it can actually be applied to anything. And what this system is for is to simplify the citations of digital publications, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in the next couple of slides. It avoids any ambiguity, so you can make sure that what you are looking at is the same thing that your reviewer is looking at. Which is interesting when we're talking about academic writing and academic publishing. We're talking about both the things that you do for your courses that you turn to your professor, but also things that you would participate in for eventual future publication. And then hopefully in your very successful careers to come, you'll be writing all kinds of stuff and getting all of those things published. And you want to make sure that you are providing the most stable and secure reference points to track your research. So all of those are things that are goals of the DOI. So a little bit of history on this one, and this is where I'm realizing that every year you guys as students get younger and I get, remarkably stay the same age. But we have not always used the internet as our primary means of sharing information, and there were a lot of growing pains that came along with that one, and there was a lot of steps towards making it a reliable place to cite information. So the first thing is that to even get the World Wide Web up, it all depends on having predictable universal protocols, which is the code that makes your web browser go to the same website that somebody else set up. So that system didn't just happen, it took a while. And along the way, we found that some open web links can become unstable. Sometimes the website that you're looking at crashes and goes offline, and then you try and turn it into a professor and they can't see the thing that you're seeing. Or people would publish stuff and then go back and change it and update it. And it was not as stable as we wanted it to be. Sometimes publishers move resources, or a publisher gets bought out and the title is now moved from one server to another server. All of these things create the link that, even though URLs are our favorite way of sharing information, URLs are not always the same. They're not stable. In fact, one of the corollaries to this lecture, whenever I talk to my actual courses, is if you don't have a DOI, how to find a stable URL. And I'm happy to tag that on to the end of this talk if you have questions about stable URLs, because it's actually one of those things that takes a little while to get your head around, the idea that a web address is not actually an address. In fact, it's because I like to say weird things. The website that you're looking at any given time doesn't actually exist. It's usually a dependent temporary URL based on how you got there. And there's a lot of stuff that's wrapped up in that one. So the same article we're finding would have different links in different databases. And then it's usually okay when you're doing it like to a professor who has the same institutional access as you are. But let's say you are doing your research here at UTD, where we subscribe to a particular set of like 376 databases, which I believe is our last count. But then you're sending it to a reviewer who's working at Texas A&M, and they have a different set of databases. You have no way of guaranteeing that the person you are sending it to has the same database access you do. So having anything that's dependent on the database that it comes in becomes problematic nomenclature. Any questions so far, Michelle? Because just let me know if I confuse people.
Sure, Chris. Yeah, none posted in the chat yet.
Excellent. So just to sum up this whole discussion, the greatest implement to legitimate use of electronic documents versus print documents has been providing stable, repeatable, citable links. And this actually is not brand new when it comes to going on the internet. One of my sort of side interests is just looking at some of the para activities towards research. And I'm fascinated by seeing how the formats, the citation formats we use respond to how we're actually doing our work. And I find I think it's fascinating. Other people wonder why I worry about it. But little things like, why do we need to know the city that a book was published in? And the reason was you had to control for what if the printer who loaded the, what do you call those tiles with letters on it, that was printing by hand? What if the printer who printed the copies in London made a different page break or made a different edit than the printer who printed the same book in New York, et cetera. So that's kind of a very old school version of the same idea. We have to control all of the variables to make sure that our readers are looking at the same thing that we are. And the DOI is the most recent incarnation of that quest. Right. So a little DOI history, and we'll come back around to that because I have more fascinating anecdotes about the history of citing things. The DOI system did not spring up overnight. This took a long time, and it was all a joint initiative of several trade associations and publishers who are getting around. They realized that they had this issue of making sure that people had stable, reliable, identifiable access to particular digital objects. And they use the word object specifically because although we're primarily talking about books and articles, that digital object is nice and open. It has a lot of room for interpretation. So they came up with this idea of creating a framework for building these identification numbers. And it's kind of based on the same idea as the International Standard Book Numbers, or ISBNs. They wanted to create something like that that would allow for all of these changing protocols. And they actually came up with it in 1997. And then they created the International DOI Foundation also in 1997 to start the process. But it didn't actually get off of its on its feet until around 2000, which is when they started actually assigning DOIs, and they weren't widely used by academics until around 2010. So it took 13, 14 years before this really had any legs at all. But now it has grown quite a bit. They have, according to the DOI website, which I looked at this morning to get this count, they have over 190 million DOIs assigned, and they are continuing to assign them. So at this point, Michelle had a question which she sent to me, and this isn't the exact question, but it relates to it, about how widespread they are, and are people backfiling or going back and assigning DOIs to things that were published before 1997. At this point, the majority of academic publishers are assigning DOIs to all the new things that they're producing. Some of them are going back and applying them retroactively. Some are not. It's not mandated, so not everybody has to do it. I have a feeling like this is on a later slide, but I'm going to say it anyway. From my anecdotal observation, the digital initiatives have the most leverage in the sciences or anything that's database, not database, but data space based. The fields that are dependent on having quantitative data tend to be the first ones to latch onto anything that gives these definitive identity numbers. So the sciences had almost complete implementation 7-8 years ago. The humanities are rapidly catching up, but they were on a probably 5-year delay. Again, I don't have a data because I don't know that anyone's tracking that on a worldwide basis as far as what percentage of penetration they had, but I've definitely seen the humanities are starting to apply them more universally now. So they're getting there. So the first application was actually through Crossref, which Crossref is still one of the biggest registration agencies, if not the biggest. I was trying to determine, I wanted to say they were the biggest, but I couldn't find any data or quotes that said specifically they were, and I'd rather not misquote. So they are a big player. Crossref, we'll talk about them a little bit. Crossref is a group, a kind of a cabal of publishers with the goal of trying to make sure that there is open and reliable access to academic and other publications online. So they were part of creating the DOI system, and they launched it in 2000 and became one of the first registering agents. And then they standardized the syntax of the DOI through NISO. And now that I'm looking at this slide, I didn't give you a definition of what NISO stands for, and off the top of my head, I can't remember. It's something National Information something something. But basically, it's an information standard that was approved and went global in 2010. So it took 10 years for them to work out the syntax and work out a plan for how they were going to develop it. And all of those are historical facts, which you may or may not actually want to know about. All right, so I think I skipped a slide here. I got it. Okay, so once the syntax was set, they decided that it had to be controlled by somebody. The International DOI Foundation decided that that would be handled by what they call registration agencies. And they can create as many DOIs as they like, as long as they follow the standard syntax rules. Publishers or authors work through the registration agencies to have their content assigned a DOI. And again, I don't have the statistics, but the majority of academic publications, publishers, excuse me, in the United States are going through that cross-ref system. So they basically form these cabals, and they have a membership with a registration agency, and the registration agency is taking down and recording all of their DOIs. They do set fees, and that's not regulated by the IDF. I think very wisely the IDF said, we don't want to be in charge of saying how much it costs to get a DOI, but there is a cost involved. Usually this is handled by the publisher. So as an author, particularly early in your career, you're not going to have to fork over money to get a DOI. If you decide to become an independent publisher and launch your own book press, which would be super exciting and cool, that would be something that you would have to take care of. All right, so when I said there are about 10 RAs, these are the 10 RAs that are listed on doi.org. And most of them, this text is probably pretty small. They seem to be largely based on region or nationality. For example, the Publications Office, the one you see on the bottom right, is for the European Union. Right above that is the Korean Institute of Science and Technology. To the left of the Koreans is the Japan Link Center. Above that is China, and I can't read that word. Anyway, so pretty much they are divided on national and continental lines. So that's why most of what goes through the US is in through Crossref. So Crossref is the one that I looked into the most because it's the one that you're going to see the most. And publishers purchase a membership with them. The membership pricing is based on volume and revenue. And it's actually not too bad. I think anyone who's making less than $100 million a year off of their publications can get a Crossref membership for about $250. But then it goes up exponentially once you get over that $200 million price point. I didn't include the pricing in the visuals on the PowerPoint because I thought that was something that was probably a little bit overkill, but it is based on revenue. Let's get back to the syntax, because part of knowing the DOI syntax has two benefits for you. One, it helps you understand where it's coming from. And if you wanted to break things down and look at the DOIs, you could pull some information from that. But also, once you know what a DOI looks like, you can spot it. It's kind of like how, as a librarian, I can see an ISBN number, and you don't have to label it as an ISBN. I know it's an ISBN because it looks like an ISBN. When I'm talking with my own students, so like telling them how to write their bibliographies and why they have to use DOIs, I get a lot of things where they're like, "Ooh, here's a number on the page," and they'll say, "Here's the DOI," and I'm like, "That's not a DOI. That looks like a page number." But once you see what a DOI is supposed to look like, it's very distinctive. It's very recognizable. So the DOI has two parts. There's a prefix, there's a slash, and then a suffix. The prefix is the part that is recognizable, that makes DOIs recognizable, and I have examples show it up in the next couple of slides. it's 10 dot and then 4 numbers. That prefix is assigned to the registration agency. The registration agency can use more than one, so often they'll break it down and assign one prefix to each publisher that is a member of that registration agency. But that part is fixed. That's the part that makes it, they're always the same. It's always 10 dot, 4 numbers, and then slash. And then whatever comes after the slash, the suffix, they can make that however they like, as long as they make it unique and identifiable. So one of the examples that comes up a lot is if you wanted to create a DOI for an entire electronic book, one of the easiest ways to do it would be to make that suffix just be the ISBN. You know, have your RA prefix / the ISBN, and that would be a really smart way to do it, as long as they are able to make sure that there's no discrepancies in that number. Again, tangent. But if you look at some examples here, here's an example, prefix / suffix. 10.1016 is the RA's number, and then everything after that one is is assigned by that publisher or that registration agency. And they're usually, if you look at them, you can figure out where they come from. So for example, this one was from the Journal of Pediatric Healthcare, which J PedHC, and then the 2008.09.006 is the date it was published. So, and off the top of my head, I'm going to assume this was an American formatted date, and we're looking at September 6th, but it might be June 9th, depending on if it's a European publisher. Sometimes these numbers will include the volume, the issue numbers, or some other, but those strings are usually, if they're smart, the particular journal will create something that's recognizable. All right, so the next question I have is, where do you find DOIs? And briefly, when I will jump out of this PowerPoint and show you some things from the wild. Generally, a DOI is going to be right up in the header of the article. Sometimes it's in the footer of the front page of the article. But if it is assigned when the article is created, it's almost always actually on the article. When you find the article through a database, it is usually in the database record, where they tell you journal, volume, issue, date of publication. There will usually be a field for DOI. You just have to get in the habit of looking for it. Usually if you find something in Google, it should say Google Scholar, it will also be displayed there. One of the tricks here, and I'll show you examples of this as well. Again, I'm thinking functional for a student. So I'm trying to make sure that I keep my verbiage recognizable. Sometimes you find the citation in one database, but the actual PDF or full text of it lives in a different database. The databases that only have the citation sometimes do not have the DOI, but if you go and look at where the full text lives, the DOI will be there. And it's one of the ways that I catch out my students who are, because I teach how to redo research, and a lot of times I just ask them to give me a summary of the articles. And I can tell if they've looked at the abstract but not the article, because they don't find the DOI, but I do. And I always tell them, if I find it but you didn't find it, you're wrong. And they're sometimes grumbling, but I think that's fair. All right, a little more on DOI formatting. Your DOI may appear as just the DOI, which is the example on the right on this slide, 10.1016/J.Jibo.2017/12/27. So that's the 27th of December from 2017 in the Journal of Jibo. Notice it's the same RA number, which is a cross-ref number. The one on the left, they've added the internet protocol, https://doi.org. In terms of what you would put in a citation, depending on how strict your professor is, both of these are acceptable. I almost always use APA, and APA takes season 1. You just put this in there. And another note, which I've mentioned at this point now, not everybody uses the DOI system, but it is increasingly common. If there isn't a DOI, then you would use a URL. Just make sure it's a stable URL. I think I stole this slide from a PowerPoint on how to make a citation. So here's an example of what that looks like. So this is APA format. It just goes at the end of your citation: author, year, article title, journal title, volume issue, and DOI. So I'm going to go back on my tangent of, well, let me pause for a second. I'm assuming that since no one has yelled question, that I'm still doing okay. But I hope if I need to slow down or if I'm boring you, you'll let me know.
Yeah, no questions posted yet, Chris.
Okay, just like to check. All right, so getting back to my history of how citations have changed, this is one of the ones that I enjoy because I've personally seen it. And again, dating myself, I graduated high school in 1998. In the 90s, we were still underlining titles of books and journals. And then later sometime while I was in college, it switched to just put it in italics and you don't have to underline it. And looking back, the reason for that one was they were holding off for the penetration of everybody using word processors versus typewriters or even hand printing. Because well, you definitely can't hand print in italics, and most typewriters don't have italics keys. So it amuses me to think about the only reason that underlining was the de facto way of doing it was because they had to do something they knew everyone could do. Even if your typewriter didn't underline it, you could still get a pen and a ruler and put it in later. They held off on making italics the standard until most of the population had access to a word processor. And that, I think, it fascinates me, these little bits of social history that are sort of hidden and buried in the way that we do things that you could easily overlook if you weren't a pedantic jerk like me. Anyway, so the DOI just replaces where we used to do date of access and URL. And again, the date of access used to be needed just in case the article was no longer there by the time somebody was grading your paper. You could say, well, it was there on this date. Now, most times you don't even have to put that date of access because we've been able to create more stable URLs, and the DOI is more stable still. I think the ultimate evolution of this, if DOIs ever reach the point where they are close to 100% penetration in the publication world, I could foresee a future, not soon, where all you have to put in your bibliography is the DOI. And since nobody likes doing bibliographies, I think that would be a popular option. We're not there yet, but I could see that being something that would happen, and I look forward to it. Right. So why is this important? The citation format rules are updated periodically to follow technology and information trends. So you do need to be paying attention to what you're supposed to be doing. The adoption, I told you this was on the later slide. The adoption is nearly complete in tech and science, and it is rapidly coming up in humanities. So this is going to be something that if you continue with multiple degrees or if you continue in academic careers, you're going to have to use DOIs. So you might as well get used to the idea now. They also have some benefits, is that now you have these definite fixed points of reference. They also make finding things more useful or more easy. That's not the right way to say that sentence. More convenient, because if you know the DOI and you have it in front of you, copy paste it into Google Scholar, copy paste it into a database. If it's indexed there, it's going to show up. If it's not indexed there, the DOI.org, which is one of the bookmarks I have open that I will show when I switch to my browser, has a link resolver. You just copy paste that link resolver into DOI.org and it will bring up a record for that article. Now, it won't always bring up full text because licensing issues and things are behind paywalls, but it will give you a definitive identity of the article at least. And then we can talk through some of the ways the library can help you access that. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint. Anybody need a breather? All right, and now I'm going to share my browser with you guys. As soon as I figure out how to do that. There it is. Okay, So you should be seeing the DOI.org now, yes? Okay, I'm going to grab. I lost my page that I was looking for. I had one open and then it looks like it expired on me, so I had to reload it. So I'm going to grab a DOI just to demonstrate what this DOI.org link resolver does. I'm not sure if y'all are seeing my whole browser or if you're seeing just DOI.org right now. But I hid my bookmark bar, so hopefully nothing untoward is on display. All right, so back to DOI.org. This is the official site for the DOI Foundation, International DOI Foundation. And over here on the right-hand side of their very front page, DOI.org is a link resolver. Resolver meaning look stuff up for you. You can take that DOI. The best way to handle DOIs, honestly, is copy paste. Unless you just really like typing out long strings, but copy paste your DOI, run that search, and it will find you that DOI through their resources or on the internet. And depending on if you are signed in at a university that has access, which I am, you'll get your download PDF right there. And if you don't, if you find that DOI goes to something that the University of Texas does not subscribe to, that UTD doesn't have access to, at least at that point you have the author and the journal title and the article title, which you could use to request it through interlibrary loan or cannot contact a librarian for help getting that actual article. So the first hard part of making sure that you're looking at the right thing has been accomplished just by going to DOI.org. And if you want to really dig into how DOIs work, they also have an online handbook all about the DOI system, how it came apart, how things are numbered, what their data model is. There are, and I have a distinct firewall when it comes to information about coding and systems and resolving protocols. I know when I hit my limit. There's a lot of detail in this handbook. And some of it's very technical. If that is your field, you could have a good old time looking through this. All right, so the next thing, kind of the last thing on my agenda was to show you some examples of what this looks like in the real world. All right, and I'm losing track of what I'm sharing right now. Am I still sharing my screen?
No, not right now.
Okay. Was I sharing my screen up until just now?
Yes, yes, you were.
Okay. Sorry, I have a ancient Toshiba and it's not letting me do stuff. So now I'm stuck looking at my PowerPoint, but I can't find you guys. Okay, I'm back. Share screen. And let's go back to my browser. Share. All right. You have to bear with some of your teachers. They're doing stuff online we didn't used to do. All right. So here's an example of the article I used as my search example of DOI.org. This is what it looks like in a Sage journal, which Sage is a major journal publisher. They have the DOI right up here at the head of the article. Am I sharing it? Yeah, yes, it says screen sharing. Okay, good. So they have it right here at the top of the article. If I open the PDF, the DOI is also up here right in the header of the PDF. Are you guys seeing the PDF right now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So they have it right here at the PDF. Sometimes you will find it down at the bottom of the page as well, or instead it'll be down here in the footer. But if the article is young enough that it was created with a DOI from day one, it will be on there somewhere. I wanted to show you this. This is the same article. I searched for it using the library's webpage using the Discover search. If you guys are not familiar, Discover search is the search box that's right in the middle of our page. It's probably our most popular search just because of the amount of things that it finds, but it normalizes things, which is to say it's actually pulling the data about the articles from other sources and making them look similar so that they can display in the same reliable format. And the DOI of this article is not, where's my scroll bar? The DOI of this article is actually not in the record that displays in the library's catalog. So this would be an example where if my student was using this as, look, I found this article, and they clicked on the citation and they had it generate a citation for them. Let's switch it to APA just to be consistent. The DOI does show up here, which actually surprised me. I didn't expect it to, but it does not show up here in the actual text of the page that describes the article. So you have to make sure that you found it. If I click on this link to view online, where it says full text available, and open it up in Sage, that would take me back to here, and that my DOI is there. So it just, as terms of practice, I want to make sure that we are all being consistent about looking for those things. Now I'm gonna do another example. This is a database called Scopus. Scopus is a big database. It's used for a lot of metrics and tracking of citations and usage of things, but it has millions of articles that it tracks, but it doesn't store full text. So this would be one of those examples where you are likely to find an article that has a DOI without the DOI being displayed. And as a side note on this one, I don't know how many of you guys are already big users of the library. This green button that you see, Get It at UTD, is key for those types of databases that are tracking citations but are not tracking, not storing the actual full text. This is a link resolver, kind of like DOI.org has a DOI resolver. This link resolver takes the information from this database and cross-matches it with the other things the library subscribes to find your full text of that article someplace else. So I guess what I'm saying here, and here it is, here's the record of this article. We're back in Discover, and it does have the the DOI displayed as part of the record. And I have a link out to the full text here, which would take me to where the PDF lives. So without going too far down this particular rabbit hole, when you find a citation, make sure that you are doing the full due diligence, getting all the way to the PDF, because, well, if you're going to cite it, you need to read it anyway, and finding those things that don't necessarily show their DOI. Many of them do have DOIs. We don't need this one. I think I've made my point on that one. The last database I have open here is JSTOR. Now, I'm assuming many of you are familiar with JSTOR. You don't have to raise your hands. I know it's one of those ones that gets talked about a lot. A lot of professors, particularly really early on when we were moving into researching electronically, JSTOR made a splash because it's the really good quality content. The standard librarian disclaimer, it is standard, we all say it. It's just to remind you, JSTOR is actually an archive rather than a live database, meaning all of the publications that they are collecting, with very few exceptions, in most recent years they've started getting better on this, they keep a rolling wall of no full text. So they only have up until like 3 years ago. And then next year, they'll get one more year, which will still make them 3 years behind. So it is great for humanities, for things where having absolutely up-to-the-minute content is not vital. But I always feel like I have to tell people that. Anyway, so let's do something historical here. Because I'm trying to make a point for things that don't have a DOI. For things that don't have a DOI, because a lot of the humanities, particularly things that are backfiled, this is a 1987 article, it's not going to have a DOI. It was definitely not born with a DOI. Some things may have been backfiled, Renaissance and history particularly, I would be very surprised if it was. Trying to open this article. Right. But what they do well, oh, it does have a DOI. So this is one that did backdate. I can't remember what article I used when I was looking at it earlier. So they did actually assign a DOI to it. It's not a cross-ref DOI. Interesting. But they also, JSTOR does a stable link, and they do display that. So for things that don't have DOIs, nearly all of them will at least have a stable link. Sometimes they call it a permalink. That's what our catalog uses. If you can't find a DOI, make sure you're looking for a stable link or a permalink. Because that is, as a professor, a pet peeve, but also just something for good practice as academics. We don't want to make it hard for people to fact check us. We want to be fact checked. We want to be reference checks. It's one of the ways we build up our credibility. So getting those stable URLs should be, and making sure the URLs that you're using are stable should be part of your standard practice. So DOI best, stable URL second best, unstable URL bad. In conclusion. So that's everything you never wanted to know about. I'm going to stop sharing now about DOIs. A lot of information.
And we have a couple of questions here, Chris.
Yep, I'm back in Zoom, so I can see them now.
So one of them is to do with format. Let's see, for UTD class research papers, is there a particular format everyone is using, like APA, or does it differ from class to class?
Oh, that's a loaded question. It differs class to class, and there's a lot of reasons why. First and foremost, most of the formats like APA, which if I'm sure you know, but APA is the American Psychological Association, are field specific, and they are sort of customized to the needs of the fields. Most humanities, particularly the arts and literatures, are still using modern languages or MLA. So a lot of times it's determined by field. And I haven't done an exhaustive study of this one, but if some of the simple things to look at is they are tailored to the particular purview of that field. So in MLA, there's a lot of focus on the author and the author's ideas and the author's process. So in MLA, we use the author's full first and last name. APA, they wanted to sort of move the focus off of anything personal in the author and keep the focus on their ideas. So we use last name and initials only. The other reason that they do that in APA is it removes, as much as is possible, any gender bias, because instead of being John or Joan, you're J, because then we don't have to know if you're a man or woman, because honestly, it doesn't matter. But to some outdated people, it might matter if you're a John or Joan, and we want to get that out of the way. So APA does initials, and that's the main reason that they do initials. So those little differences, which don't seem very important, are customized around each field. So the short answer is it depends on the field. A side note about that one, and I'm somewhat guilty of this one, I'm trying not to be that guy, but a lot of professors will kind of hit their growth point, where they're like, I learned this particular format in my undergraduate. They updated it for my graduate and I had to relearn it. They updated it again when I did my PhD. And you know what? Now I'm tenured and I'm not learning any new systems. You don't run this as much as you used to, but you may find somebody who's like, I know APA 6, that's why I'm happy. I know they just published the 7th, but I want you to do the 6th. I don't think they should do that, but it is within the professor's purview to do so. So I guess even within, if their field should be using the APA, they may still prefer MLA and they may tell you what they want to do. My general guideline is if you don't know what format to use, ask the professor. If the professor doesn't care, find out what is the most common for your field that you will be using when you graduate and start publishing. So you might as well learn that format.
Great.
It's gotten better.
Chris.
Yeah, no worries. It's gotten better. I can run on about anything. When I started at UTD 12 years ago, they made all graduate students do their thesis and dissertations in Turabian format, regardless of field. That is no longer the rule. And I think, by the way, Michelle, that is a really good rule change, because it forced a lot of people to learn formats that weren't really ideal for what they were writing about and were stuff that they were never going to use after they graduated. It did simplify the review process because everybody was following the same model. But anyway, there's a really long answer. Let's look at our next question. Rachel asked, even though citing the DOI is acceptable in numerical or URL form, is it good practice to make sure all the DOIs in your bibliography are listed in the same format? That's an excellent question. I don't know that there's a functional difference. I guess that URL version, which got the HTTP on it, has the advantage of you can copy paste it from your bibliography directly into your browser, and you don't have to stop by the doi.org to get there first. So possibly that is good. Stylistically, I do like to see some consistency. Like, pick which one you like and do it that way. I think it's a great concept. But I don't think there's a rule about it. And honestly, functionally, they probably work at about the same. Run it by your professor and see if they have a preference. Do we have any other questions? All right, well, I hope that everyone found something that they could use in this, or at least something that explains why you have to do the stuff that you're being forced to do. And at least you've got some great trivia that you can use on a pub quiz or on Jeopardy someday.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Excellent. Thank you, Kathy. You're welcome, Lillian. Or Liliana, sorry. Lost your last A there.
Great, thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, my pleasure. Like I said, I hope it was useful. I enjoyed putting it together. If you guys have suggestions for other things you'd like us to do for future workshops, just let Michelle know, or you can contact me. I'm really easy to find on the library's website. I want to keep creating these workshops, so if there's other things you want to know, shoot a question my way and we'll either work with you one-on-one or do a new workshop for you.
That's great, wonderful. And I'll be sending out the evaluation link to the folks who participated today, so maybe some more suggestions will come that way too.
Great, thank you so much. All right, everybody stay safe. I'm going to go ahead and sign out then if y'all don't have any questions.